What's going on, everyone? Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast presented by Reality Sports Online. My name is Kyle Yates, and I am your host. I am joined, as always, by Ray Garvin. Ray, how's it going, man?
I am doing well, Yates. How are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm doing good. I gotta be honest with everyone, though. I am about 7 hours away from getting up and heading to Cancun. So literally leaving at like 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to the airport. So I am finding that balance of like, all right, I got to be present. I got to get the energy. We got to talk Dynasty. Of course, I got to have the energy, but yet also like I'm about to get out of this like 2 feet of snow that I'm in again to hit the 85-degree weather. So if you see me just kind of like, If I start to trail off, man, you just yell at me. Feel free to yell at me, okay?
Listen, no one's going to blame you if I'm talking and you're gazing off into like a beautiful just oasis and beautiful weather. Like, people are going to forgive you, Yates, but don't worry. I got the gas with me tonight. We're going to be all right. We're going to get through this, brother.
Hey, you always got that, so I can always count on you to bring some energy. You can find Ray on Twitter at RayGQ, that's QUE, and I can be found on Twitter as well at KyleYNFL. We're going to take a look at some news items that have broke over the past couple of days since we did our last episode, and then we've got a little bit of a dynasty strategy that we're going to dive in depth into and talk through, and then we're going to talk through our dynasty quarterback rankings, taking a look at our top 15 quarterbacks in our dynasty rankings. However, I did want to mention this before we get into the main part of the show. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're a loyal follower of Fantasy Pros and you know about our draft simulator. It's a fun way to do realistic mock drafts in as little as 15, 10, or even 5 minutes. Well, MVP and Hall of Fame members can also use our draft simulator for dynasty startup mocks or rookie mocks as well. I just went in and did a rookie mock the other day. It was done in 5 minutes. It was awesome. If you're not already an MVP or Hall of Fame member, then upgrade today at fantasypros.com/premium and start prepping to win your Dynasty League. You can find our draft simulator over at fantasypros.com/simulator. Again, that's fantasypros.com/simulator. All right, Ray, there's a couple of news items. These aren't major things. Not a whole lot's happening here, but a couple of Eagles wide receivers were released, or at least expected to be released. Alshon Jeffery, we all kind of saw this one coming, is expected to be released by the Eagles once the league year starts. And then Deshaun Jackson as well. Both of these guys. Now you're looking at a wide receiver room of Jalen Reagor. You still got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside there. Greg Ward. I mean, they got to bring in someone.
Yeah, it's coming, man. And I've got a feeling that all the Eagles fans who were upset that they drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson just may land their LSU Tiger here in 2021.
There we go. Additionally, Kenny Golladay, reportedly a strong franchise tag candidate by Detroit. Now, Detroit's heading into a multi-year rebuild, so if anything, I would think this leads to a tag and trade type of scenario. I doubt that they are going to try to keep Kenny Golladay, or that Kenny Golladay wants to be there, right? He's a wide receiver hitting, his first contract, big contract. He wants to pay in. He wants to make it big. So for Kenny Golladay, I expect him to be at least a tag and trade candidate, if not hitting the open market. And then, again, big breaking news. Miami is unlikely to bring back Matt Breida. It looks like they're going to roll into next season with Myles Gaskin, Savon Ahmed, and maybe we see them at a running back out of Alabama. We'll see. All right, so Ray, when we sat down and we did our first episode, we talked about we want to hit a wide range of audiences, right? Where we want to talk to the people who have never done Dynasty before. They have no idea what that entails. And I feel like we did a really good job of that in the first episode. So if you are in that camp and you have not listened to the first episode, pause this, go back and listen to that. We break it down pretty in-depth there. But we also wanted to talk to everyone who has been playing Dynasty for several years, and they may just be looking to garner some more advice, to hear some other perspectives and stuff like that. So there's a strategy that you wanted to talk through here, and I want to just throw this to you and let you break it down and explain it. It's called the productive struggle approach. So let's talk to the people here and say, like, what is it? What is it at its core? Who came up with it? Let's break it down here for the people.
Yeah, so I do not want anybody to get upset with me. So if I'm wrong with who came up with it, then I apologize sincerely. But the first person or the first people I ever saw talking about this when I joined the Dynasty space were Ryan McDowell from DLF and Scott Barrett from Fantasy Points. And what the productive struggle essentially is you are I don't want to say tanking, but you are foregoing any type of competition your first year or two in dynasty leagues, because while your league mates are drafting veterans to try to win the championship in that year that you guys start, in the inception year, you are selecting nothing but rookies and second-year players, knowing good and well you're probably not going to compete, you're probably not going to make the playoff. But if everything breaks correctly and you land the correct rookies, and your team is bad enough that you get high draft picks in the next year's rookie class, by year 2 or 3, you should have a pretty dominant team on your hands that can compete for titles for the foreseeable future. So that's why it's the productive struggle. You are struggling the first year. You may be struggling the second year, but by the time year 2, year 3 rolls around, you should be sitting pretty and you should have a dominant roster on your hands.
So it sounds great in theory, right? And I think that it definitely can pay off if you have the patience, right? Now, a lot of people, myself included, might not be the most patient there to wait it out, right? So looking at the other side, like what are some of the, not pitfalls, but what are some of the negatives that can happen with this type of approach? Does anything come to your mind there?
Well, absolutely. You can draft the wrong rookies. You can draft the wrong rookies, or the rookies that you invest in don't hit, they don't fire, and now you're stuck with a very, very bad team with no hopes of getting better, right? And, Yates, you and I are actually in a league together where I actually implemented this strategy, and it's funny because I vividly remember some of the draft selections I was making during the startup, and people laughed and thought I was crazy and was just like, Ray, what are you doing? You are ruining your team. And as I look at that roster right now, Kyle, I am probably going to be pretty formidable here already in year 2, and it is littered with some high-end rookies and already some high-end dynasty assets. And I'll just tell you what, it's probably my favorite of all the dynasty leagues that I'm a part of. It's probably my most favorite roster that I have.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about that in the first episode. Like, you play Dynasty to have fun. So if this is something that you think is going to bring you joy or whatever, that you're going to have fun with this type of approach, then go for it. Like, but again, you need to be realistic and have that expectation that you're not going to be good the first year, maybe not even the second year. So if you have the patience, if you have the money to be able to just throw away as far as league dues and stuff like that, then that is a fine approach. But as far as balancing it with other types of approaches, right, because that's something that we wanted to talk about too, I think, and a question that came up as I was listening to you talk about this, like as you are sitting there and you're going into the draft, the startup draft, with the perspective of I'm only taking rookies and second-year players, are you just completely like reaching for these players? If you're sitting there in a round and you're looking at the ADP around the board and it's all, third-year players and up like that, are you just completely reaching on ADP and saying 20 picks off, I'm grabbing this guy because it fits this strategy? Or at some point, do you play the value game?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I do think that, I selected Joe Burrow 9th overall in the first round. And I do think at that moment it was a reach. But as I look at where I have Joe Burrow ranked in my dynasty quarterback rankings, where I have some of these other players ranked, it looked like a reach then. But now, getting Justin Herbert like in the 9th round, I mean, that would never, ever happen again. Like and we talked about this a couple of shows ago. The cheapest place that you get rookies are in your rookie drafts or, in a fresh startup drafts. And you asked a really good question, and I don't think I hit on it well enough. What are some of the pitfalls? The pitfalls are you get an owner who implements this strategy, who drafts the wrong rookies, and then he leaves the league. And then you're trying to find a replacement for a team that nobody wants to be a part of. And I do think you have to be careful when, it's just that is probably the biggest pitfall is an owner, a dynasty manager, drafting a really, really bad team and then walking away from that team after year 1, and then you're trying to find a replacement, and it just kind of throws off the vibe of the league. But as far as reaching and value, I do think there were a couple of times where I did extend myself maybe a round or two as far as ADP. But again, when I'm looking at what I have right now, it's literally my favorite roster that I've constructed in Dynasty.
Yeah, and you said, you've got to hit on those rookies. Well, you have to know the rookies that you're going to be selecting. Don't just walk into your startup draft and say like, well, I don't know who this player is, but they're the highest ranked rookie on this, whoever's site. Like, really take the time to get to know these rookies and what they can be, and that's what we're here for. Ray and I will be breaking down these rookies in depth as we move throughout draft season to make sure that if you do want to implement the productive struggle approach in your strategy in your draft, you're well equipped to do so. So let's take a look. You mentioned that you took Joe Burrow there at the end of the first round. It may have been a reach, but now he's sitting pretty in Dynasty quarterback rankings. So let's move into this conversation. Let's just take some time. I don't know how long this conversation is going to be, but I think that we can spend a lot of time here talking about quarterback rankings. And we're going to start, Ray, and do a countdown style, but we're going to start at 15 and talk our way through 10. And then we'll do that in a block. We'll talk about those players. I'm sure that our rankings are going to be very different.
Right.
Towards the top, I'm sure that we'll have some consensus names, but the placement of these guys is going to be drastically different. So let's take a look at your rankings here, 15 through 10. Just walk us down from 15 to 10, and let's see who you got there.
All right. At 15, I have Ryan Tannehill, quarterback, Tennessee. I think we all know what doggone teams they play for.
I think we're good. The rookies, I think we break down their school or where, but yeah.
We got Ryan Tannehill at 15, Tua Tagovailoa at 14, Matthew Stafford at 13, Baker Mayfield at 12, Jalen Hurts at 11, and Aaron Rodgers at 10.
Okay, perfect. So a lot of my names overlap in there too. I've got Baker Mayfield at 15. I've got Matthew Stafford at 14. I've got Jalen Hurts at 13. I did move Carson Wentz back up to 12 here, so he's sitting in this range. And then Ryan Tannehill at 11, and then Aaron Rodgers at 10. So one of the names that you had in there, I've got him just outside, is Tua Tagovailoa. Let's take a little bit of time here, and let's talk about Tua, because this is an interesting case study, right? Comes into the NFL and was one of those players at Alabama that had the situation was perfect around him. You're looking at the wide receiver room now, knowing what we know now, right? The wide receiver room that he was throwing to of Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, like, good night, and then Najee Harris out of the backfield. Like, everything was perfect for him. And now he steps into Miami where the playmakers around him were not there. Mike Gesicki's still developing. I mean, Preston Williams and Devontae Parker, they're more of like contested catch players, which Tua really didn't have to throw into tight windows at Alabama because everyone was freaking open. So Tua, the situation, it looks like Miami is committed to building around him. And if that's the case, I think they're going to do everything in their power to surround him with playmakers in this upcoming draft. I did a release, my mock draft 3.0, which you can find on FantasyPros.com, released that earlier today. And I had Miami taking Najee Harris and Jalen Waddle in the first round with a trade down situation. So I think at that point, just do what works and surround him with those playmakers that can, make life easy on him. So if Tua gets those playmakers, I think that he absolutely could ascend into the top 10. But what's the argument against Tua, right? As we sit here, we've got him kind of low comparative to where the expectations were for him coming out of Alabama. As we're sitting there at, where did you have him, 14 or 15?
14th overall.
Yeah, 14 and 16. So let's take a look at the other side of Tua and what are some of the negatives or what could go wrong with him as we move forward in Dynasty.
Well, the first thing that really was concerning for me, and I know it's the off season, it's a lull in content, it's a lull in news, but the fact that there were a lot of reports about Miami potentially not being sold on him as the quarterback of the future, right? There's a lot of smoke around. There was even talk about them potentially taking another quarterback, trading Tua to the Texans. It's sort of like,
well, I mean, even I really even with them benching him for Ryan Fitzpatrick towards the end of the year.
And my thing was, I said from day one that I just wish he didn't play at all this year, because I talked to a lot of guys who are in the medical field, the physical therapy world. I don't know how comfortable or healthy he was after an injury that we've rarely seen players come back from, but let alone quarterbacks, right? So when you have an offense that is devoid pass-catching weapons, when you have a quarterback coming off such a devastating collegiate injury, and then he's in the lineup, he's out of the lineup, he's in the lineup, he's out of the lineup, and it's weird. It was like Brian Flores was saying, we thought, Ryan Fitzpatrick would close the game better. Like, this isn't baseball. You don't bring in a closer in the fourth. So while I agree that there is upside, there is talent, and if they do bring in a Jalen Waddle, a Devontae Smith, and Najee Harris, that absolutely helps Tua. But I need to see it again before I can push him into a top 12, a top 13. He's right on the cusp for me. I think he does have the talent, but I'm still a little skeptical on him.
Yeah, and I mean, all the things that I mentioned as I was talking through Tua and his profile, I didn't even mention the medical issues, right? The concern. And so, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's crazy to think. That seems like it was so long ago.
Yeah.
That we were even having the conversation just Tua even enter the NFL draft, right? That seems like an eternity ago with everything else that has happened in the world since then. So there's a guy that I've got right at 15. I think you had him a little bit above. That's Baker Mayfield. Now, people are going to be listening and they're saying, like, Baker Mayfield, I don't want Baker in Dynasty, at least not as my QB1. Well, we don't have him ranked as a QB1. We both have him outside the top 12. Correct me if I'm wrong there. But with Baker, let's talk about him and his situation and why we are both optimistic, at least enough, to put him here within our top 15.
Well, yeah, and actually, I know I'm that guy. I do have him at quarterback 12. I have him right there at QB 12, okay. But I struggled with it. I struggled between him, Stafford. I wanted Wentz in there. But here's why I'm still very bullish on Baker Mayfield. First 3 years of his career, 3 different offensive coordinators, 3 different head coaches. It was just a mess, right? Finally, some stability with Kevin Stefanski. They've got one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. They have a fantastic running game. And while I do not believe he has this incredibly high ceiling, like we're never going to see Baker Mayfield finish as a top 5 quarterback, we did see him take strides forward, throwing the ball, pushing it downfield towards the end of the season. And again, with such a strong running game, a solid offensive line, one of the best rookie offensive linemen in the NFL, if they get him another pass-catching weapon, 2 years in the same system, that should only bode well for Baker, and I think he's a very safe quarterback with some upside, right? He's not just floor. I do believe Baker Mayfield can go out there and give you quarterback 1 weeks. We've seen that happen, and I truly know I'm one of those guys that's out on a limb, but I am a little more bullish on Baker Mayfield, the arm talent, the situation. This is not the Cleveland Browns of the past. So I want Baker. I like Baker there. And here's the thing. I have him as a top 12 quarterback, but 9 times out of 10, you don't have to pay top 12 prices in order to get him.
Right. Yeah, the argument against Baker being a top 12 or top 10 dynasty quarterback, however we want to classify it, is that, well, what are the overall pass attempts, right? Like, it's the conversation of the scheme and how committed they are to the run game with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, and what's Baker going to top 30 pass attempts, how many times a season? Like, that's the argument against him, but yet the upside is, you talked about adding dude, they have Odell Beckham Jr. still on this roster.
Yeah.
That even catches me by surprise because Baker started to click with this offense. You started to see the scheme work for him towards the end of the season as they moved along, and he was doing that without Odell Beckham on the field. Now, if they get OBJ back on the field and they're committed to, let's not force him the ball, let's let him be a part of the offense, operate within the scheme, OBJ has the talent to absolutely take Baker within the top 10 of Dynasty, right? Because at that point, he's letting his playmakers work for him. So I think, there are some pros and cons to Baker, right? We can talk about the overall pass attempts and just the perception of him, but yet with Kevin Stefanski now in town, and this offense was clicking towards the end of last year, the future is bright for Baker Mayfield. So let's take a look here at who did you have sitting there? Who haven't we talked about that you wanted to mention here? Matthew Stafford. Should we talk about Stafford?
Well, I really want, because I struggled, because I had Carson Wentz and I moved him around. I just want your quick takes on Wentz cracking your top 15 quarterbacks.
So I had Wentz and Hurts. I had them kind of just in no man's land, right? As we were moving throughout this offseason and the reports of, well, Wentz wants to be traded and Hurts and all this and this and this, right? And I just had them kind of at a standstill because I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who is going to be even the starter if Wentz doesn't get traded. Well, now we have that clarity. We know that Carson Wentz landed back with Frank Reich, and he has a talented offensive line. We can't talk enough about the rotation of offensive linemen that Carson Wentz had last year. I mean, I don't have the exact number, but it's astronomical. The amount of different players and lineups that he had in front of him, right? So with Carson Wentz now with one of the most talented offensive linemen, they still have pick number 21 overall in the NFL draft where they could easily add an offensive tackle there to take over for Anthony Costanzo. And then the playmakers around him, Michael Pittman Jr., I'm a big fan. Paris Campbell coming back from injury. If they retain T.Y. Hilton or if they add someone else in the second round or third round of the NFL draft. The situation is so much better here in Indianapolis for Carson Wentz than it was in Philadelphia with very little playmakers around him. Zach Ertz fell off a cliff last year, right? So his security blanket, right? You need that security blanket for Wentz over the field. There are still some issues. Absolutely. Yeah. There are still things that he is going to have to work through. Ranking him this high is a gamble. I get it. But yet I want to kind of land in the middle because 2 years ago, where did we have Carson Wentz in Dynasty rankings? Yeah. Top 5. Like, he was in that conversation because the future was looking really, really bright if he could stay healthy, right? So I think now I want to kind of land in the middle because people were completely out on Carson Wentz with him getting benched towards the end of last year, Jalen Hurts stepping in. Now I want to land a little bit in the middle, and I'm optimistic. Okay. Cautiously optimistic.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And we've already kind of discussed both of our loves of Matthew Stafford, so I don't think we really need to dive into it. And Yates, I already screwed up the exercise because I was supposed to stop at 11 and I stopped at 10. So let's move on through for our players ranked 10 through 6, and I'll go ahead and start it off again. Okay. So
go for it. It's funny though because I did the exact same thing. So you could have just let that slide. No one would have known. No one would have known. Well, but let's go. I want
to do this in the blocks. We need to do this right. So we're gonna go 10 because we didn't talk about it. But at 10, I have Aaron Rodgers. At 9, Russell Wilson. 8, Joe Burrow. 7, Lamar Jackson. And 6, Dak Prescott.
All right. So we started off the same. I got Aaron Rodgers at 10. 9, Russell Wilson. 8, I have Justin Herbert. 7, Lamar Jackson. And then 6, Joe Burrow. So let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Let's just work our way down because we got a similar order here. So Aaron Rodgers, excuse me. Let's talk about him. So Rodgers, MVP, performing at just a ridiculously high level in this offense. I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. He's probably the greatest passing quarterback of all time. Tom Brady holds the greatest quarterback of all time, title in my opinion, just because of everything that position encompasses. But as far as like the overall passer, I think it's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT. So, but he's coming up towards the end of his career. So we have to take that into consideration as we're looking at Dynasty, looking and forecasting forward. Aaron Rodgers, while he's still playing in Green Bay, while he's still got Devontae Adams, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, in my opinion. But yet, we have to take a look at the other side. What are the arguments against Aaron Rodgers, and is ranking him here at 10 fair?
This is honestly, of all the rankings, I know there were some tough calls, but this one for me was like pretty easy. And it's not because Aaron Rodgers is bad. He's great. He's the reigning MVP of the NFL. But he's 37 years old, and I don't believe he's one of those players like Tom Brady who's going to play until he's 43 years old. There's already been reported rumors about, him potentially not being in Green Bay, whether it was this year or this is his last season upcoming. It's one of those things where I just can't. You have to know in Dynasty, if you draft Aaron Rodgers at his right now where he's going in startup drafts with his ADP, you've got to be prepared for him to not be on your roster in 2 years. And I personally just do not like the Dynasty that way. I like security at the quarterback position. I don't want to have to worry about that position year after year. So it has nothing to do with his talent. He's still one of the best, if not the best passer outside of Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. He's got the best wide receiver in the NFL. It's just, honestly, it comes down to age and how long is he going to be in Green Bay? And if he's not in Green Bay, where is he at? And I just don't want to bank on that.
Yeah, and I think a strategy that you can typically see with Superflex formats particularly is where, you grab one of these top-tier quarterbacks, whether in the first round or the second round of your startup draft, you're walking away with a Deshaun Watson, a Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, whatever. And then you wait a little bit, right? You wait a couple rounds, you soak up some value at running back or wide receiver, and then you grab another quarterback later on, right? But I think if you were going to draft Aaron Rodgers in a startup Superflex, I think that then immediately you need to turn around with your next pick and grab another quarterback, right? Because letting that go at the same distance or gap be at the top with Aaron Rodgers, I'm turning right back around it. I'm grabbing my number 11 at Ryan Tannehill, right? As far as ADP, whatever that may be, I'm turning right back around and I'm grabbing another quarterback in that next round because I know that I have to prepare that Aaron Rodgers is not going to be in my roster, like you said, in 2 years. All right, and the older that he gets, the more that we see Green Bay start to, turn the page to Jordan Love, and that's a whole other conversation. But the more that we see that happen, then the writing's on the wall that Aaron Rodgers is probably coming up towards the end of his career, and you need to be prepared for it. So yeah, I think at 10, that's ranking him there is fine. I could make the case that he is a little bit lower, but I don't know if I could put him above the other guys that we talked about here of like a Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, players like that. So let's talk about Russ. Started off the season at an insane rate, right? Like he looked like the MVP, like surefire. Like at week 4, it was like, let's just call it in. It's Russell Wilson. Yep. And then the offense fell off a cliff. Like that, it was just terrible towards the end of the year. So there are going to be people who are split on Russell Wilson and his outlook in Dynasty moving forward. You've got Pete Carroll, who is, doubled down on his commitment to the run this offseason, saying that they want to get back to that, and taking the pressure off of Russ. It's no longer, or it could be no longer let Russ cook, right? So what's the argument against Russell Wilson? We know what he can be. We know what he can do when he's got full command of this offense and everything's clicking. But at the same time, what is the argument against Russell Wilson? And again, I'll ask it, is ranking him here at 9 fair?
Yeah, I think it's almost the same, and I know this is going to sound crazy because he's a better player, he's got more upside, but it's almost the same argument that we made with Baker Mayfield. Is he going to throw the ball enough? And I believe, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't think he throws a lot of pass attempts. Like, he's not out there slinging it around 600 times a season, a la Patrick Mahomes and company. And it is Pete Carroll, the commitment to the run in Seattle. I just think it limits his upside. And once he stops cooking, once Russ is now elite game manager, right? And I know people don't want to hear that, and that sounds bad, but he's not slinging it around 45 times a game. So I think this is appropriate. And, I know it seems like Russ has been in the league for a while. He's going in his age 32, 33 season. So again, dynasty age matters. Yes, Russell Wilson is a locked and loaded QB1. Yes, he could potentially finish the season as the QB1, but the probability of him doing that, we have not seen that consistently throughout a full 16-game season, fantasy season. So therefore, I just can't have him ranked higher than some of these other guys, and I think this is appropriate for Russell Wilson. And honestly, that's a good value. If you're getting Russell Wilson as quarterback 9, quarterback 10 off of the board, you'd probably be very, very happy, especially if you passed on quarterback with your first pick.
Yeah, completely. And another side of this that I, was thinking as you were talking is that Russ is making some waves in the media, right? He's talking about, well, I don't know, or that decision isn't up to me. It's up to the Seahawks as far as if I'm going to be traded or if I'm going to be in, like that. He's making some waves there. Now, Seattle has doubled down saying that, no, Russ isn't going anywhere. He's not getting traded. He's our quarterback. So, but yet there's at least something there where if Russell Wilson pulls a Deshaun Watson on a much smaller scale and for much different reasons, right? But if he pulls that type of move and he wants out of Seattle, we could be talking about him in a different light because same age as Matthew Stafford off the top of my head. We've got Stafford at 14, at least in my rankings. I've got him at 14. I know you had him in that same block. Yep. And if Russell Wilson ends up in a different offense, one that's, let's talk about San Francisco. If he ends up in, Kyle Shanahan's scheme or whatever, we're going to have a very different view of Russell Wilson, and he could even rise higher. But that's just a little footnote. Don't go making any trades or anything like that based off of that little news. But again, Seattle has doubled down, saying that he is their quarterback. So a guy that you had in this range that we both had here, I think we both had him at the same. That's Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson at 7 for me. He was at 7 for you, right?
That's correct. I have him at 7.
Yeah, so Lamar Jackson, this is a fall from where he was last year. I think I had him at 1 or 2 in my quarterback rankings. I mean, in Superflex leagues and startups, it was Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes going off the board at 101 and 102. Talk about Lamar and why he experienced a fall relative to where he was being drafted last year.
Listen, there's nothing. It just comes down to passing, man. It comes down to the upside that he gives you throwing the ball. The 2018 season was ridiculous, and we knew that he was not going to be able to continue that level of passer efficiency. And I think he's somewhere in between the 2018 season or his MVP season and this past season. 2018, I believe, was his rookie year, second year, whatever. But you guys know his MVP season. I think he's somewhere in between that one and what we just saw. And it's just the upside of him throwing the ball. Yes, you're getting essentially an RB1 on the ground, but when it's time to throw the ball, I just don't trust it. And part of that is the Baltimore Ravens organization not surrounding Lamar Jackson with competent pass catchers.
Right.
And another part of that is just while he has progressed in the passing department, are the Ravens ever going to trust Lamar Jackson to throw the ball 35, 36, 37 times a game? And if they do, how consistent, how accurate, can he be? And I don't buy it. This is a huge fall for a player who's supremely talented, and as long as he's playing quarterback in the NFL, I think he's going to be a quarterback one because of that rushing floor. But I just want some more consistency through the air, and I don't think we're going to get that from Lamar.
So I've got him at the same spot for the same reasons that you mentioned, right? It's the passing concerns and how does that translate, right? But let's talk about what happens if Baltimore this offseason surrounds Lamar Jackson with, let's say they sign a Corey Davis in free agency. Let's say that they add a tight end in the draft, one that can complement Mark Andrews, right? Because that was something that was missing from their offense with Hayden Hurst being traded away. They needed that second tight end with how many, 13 or 12 personnel that they run. So let's just play it forward. At that point, do you have more optimism for Lamar Jackson? Does it all come down to the pass catchers is what I'm asking. Does it all come down to that? And if he gets those, does it move him up your rankings? Or are you going to be kind of just waiting to see what does he do from a throwing perspective, a pure passing perspective?
Nope, won't move him up. It will help, and I will be more confident that he may take that step forward. But I'm going to wait and see. I'm still going to wait and see if he can actually hit the pass catchers. That's just what it is. I just have to see him do that consistently, and we've yet to see that. Outside of him targeting Mark Andrews, we haven't seen it. So if they draft Rashad Bateman and sign a Corey Davis, that will bode well and that will help. Maybe I'd give him – honestly, based on my rankings, I don't think I'd give him a nudge at all. Yates, I don't think I move him up at all. I just want to wait and see, and if he turns it around, bravo. He'll increase his ranking, but I got to see it happen, and so far it has not happened. So I need consistency.
I'm taking the same approach because I'm looking at the guys that I've got above on my list, and I'm like, I don't know if I could because these other guys are rock solid options. I would have to bump one of them down, and I just don't know if I can do that. So let's talk about a guy that we both had at 6, though. That's Joe Burrow. Burrow showed out his rookie season, the parts that he was on the field, obviously had the injury, and now he's working his way back from that, and it sounds like everything's progressing well, and he could even be ready for the start of the 2021 season, but he lived up to the hype, man. I mean, he was coming in as in the conversation of the greatest college football quarterback prospect that we've seen. I mean, he put up the greatest college season from a quarterback that we've ever seen before, so he steps into Cincinnati. He's got T. Higgins. He's got Tyler Boyd. He's got the pass catcher. He's got Joe Mixon out of the backfield. Like, everything was looking great, and then the offensive line let him down. Now, long term, I'm all in on Joe Burrow. I was all in to begin with. Nothing that I saw from this past season is going to make me jump off of that. So long term, let's talk about Joe Burrow and why he's sitting here at 6, which is a very, very, we talked about him as kind of the teaser and the segue into this segment. That's a really generous ranking for a rookie quarterback who played, 12, 11, 10 games?
Look, I drafted him 10th overall in our startup. I'm a big believer in Joe Burrow, and the only reason I have him ranked at 8 is because I just want to see him come back from that injury, and I want to see Cincinnati take care of him. And by take care of him, I mean get offensive line protection. They need to sign as many offensive linemen as possible. They need to draft Penny Sewell if they have an opportunity to do so. Protect your franchise quarterback. What's crazy is, Yates, Joe Burrow is going to be 25 years old in December in his second season, right? And there is a possibility that we don't even see him play this year. And for me, I don't think that would be, if his knee is as destroyed as everybody said it is, I don't even think that'd be the worst thing. I would hate it because I think he's such a fun, talented player. But if you're telling me Burrow sits out this year and he comes back the 2022 season 100% healthy and confident with an improved offensive line, I'd be just fine with that. Listen, I think he's got top 5 potential. I think we're looking at a potential top 5 quarterback. The only reason I have him at 8 is because of the injury. And had he not injured his knee, I'd probably have him ranked ahead of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, that's something. If I get news that he, is not going to start the 2021 season, he's going to start on the PUP or whatever, or on IR, then he will take a 1 hit, 2 hit right down my ranking. He'll fall just a little bit. But yet, as of right now, it's sounding like he could be ready. So I'm going to keep him there at 6. I'm going to keep him there. I'm going to hold tight. Let's go down through our rankings up to this point before we move into the final block. So let's go with you. Work your way down from 15 to 6.
Yeah, at 15, Ryan Tannehill. 14, Tua Tagovailoa. 13, Matt Stafford. 12, Baker Mayfield. 11, Jalen Hurts. At 10, Aaron Rodgers. 9, Russell Wilson. 8, Joe Burrow. 7, Lamar Jackson. And 6, Dakota Rain Prescott.
Okay, and then I've got Baker Mayfield at 15, Matthew Stafford at 14, Jalen Hurts at 13, Carson Wentz at 12, Ryan Tannehill at 11, Aaron Rodgers 10, Russell Wilson 9, Justin Herbert at 8, Lamar Jackson at 7, Joe Burrow at 6, and then let's move our way into the top 5. Work your way down from 5 to 1, brother.
All right, at 5, I have Justin Herbert, quarterback. Los Angeles Chargers. I just like saying Los Angeles Chargers. L.A., I'm a West Coast guy. I got Justin Herbert at 5. I have Kyler Murray at 4. Josh Allen at 3. Deshaun Watson at 2. And I don't think there's any surprise who's number 1. It's Patty Mahomes.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, there were going to be some consensus guys here in the top 5. I've got Dak Prescott at 5. I've got Deshaun Watson at 4. Kyler Murray at 3. Josh Allen at 2, and Patrick Mahomes at 1. So let's talk about Justin Herbert. You've got him up at, you said 5?
5. I got Herbert at 5.
All right, perfect. I've got him at 8. Now, the difference, I'll say this, the difference in my rankings between 5 and 8 is not drastic, right? It's a small gap. So let's talk about this, though. Justin Herbert, let's go back to Oregon, man.
Okay.
Like, him coming out, it wasn't great. Like, I'm going to be honest. I didn't have him ranked very highly. I had clearly Joe Burrow at 1, Tua right behind him. And then I had, actually, I think I talked about this on a previous episode, I had Jake Fromm at 3. And then Justin Herbert at 4 because the 2018 tape for Justin Herbert was actually pretty good. 2019, not so much. So him coming into the NFL, landing in Los Angeles, and, I mean, he steps in. Can we even talk about him stepping in, like, I was listening to Hunter Henry talk the other day, and he was like, we didn't even know that ran into the huddle because that was the situation where Tyrod had his lung punctured.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert runs into the huddle, and Hunter was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Like, he legitimately asked that question for the first snap of that game. And so Justin Herbert gets thrown into the fire, and he delivers. He comes out, and, I mean, the stretch that he went on and just set the league on fire. So Herbert, I am very, very optimistic for him moving forward, but yet at the same time, I'm also kind of wanting to like pump the brakes because I still have this larger sample size hanging over my head and in my mind of like, okay, but he didn't look that great in college. What happened? What changed? Is he going to come back down to earth a little bit? What's this all going to look like? So are you just all in on Justin Herbert? You think that he is the real deal? He's going to be a top-tier quarterback long-term. Where are you at with Justin Herbert?
I do. I'm all in. He's got all the physical tools. Like you said, the 2018 tape at Oregon was phenomenal, and there were talks that if he had come out in 2018, he was going to be one of the top draft picks that year, and a lot of people thought he was going to come out. He returns for a senior year. He wanted to play with his brother, who's a tight end at Oregon, and it just didn't go well for him in the season in totality, but there were still some really good moments. Here's the thing for me. I'm looking at the tools and what he can do well. At 6'6", at his size, he's very athletic and mobile, and I don't even think we really saw him really scratch the potential of what he can do on the ground because he was just tearing teams up from the pocket. With with improved pass catching weapons, I'm hopeful that they add another pass catching weapon outside of Keenan Allen. Mike Williams may not be back. Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson aren't legitimate pass catchers. Like I just think that the ceiling is extremely high and the arrow was pointed up for Herbert. I do want to see him do it again, right? I can't be all in and have him, quarterback 2, quarterback 3 right now. But a young quarterback that has just a bazooka attached to his arm, I saw enough out of him this 2020 season without a traditional training camp, without rookie mini camp, without OTAs.
Right. We didn't even talk about that.
To do what he did. I don't think people understand how ridiculous that season was. And it was just special because Burrow was on that same trajectory, but we did see Herbert do it healthily throughout the whole season. So I'm comfortable with him at 5.
The interesting part for me heading into next season, too, is the head coaching change, right? We've got Brandon Staley stepping in, the former defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. He stays in the same stadium, just becomes the head coach for the other team. So what does that do for the overall offensive philosophy? If memory serves correctly, I can look this up, or maybe you can while I'm talking. Shane Steichen is the offensive coordinator, or was last year. I think he was retained in that coaching change. So I think the offense is probably going to stay the same, but do we see the overall philosophy change? Does Brandon Staley, as a defensive-minded coach, does he step in and say, okay, we're going to commit to the run game. We're going to add we're going to invest significant draft capital in a Javonte Williams at the top of the second round or whatever, right? Like to invest in that running back to make sure that we take away some of the pressure off of Justin Herbert and we commit to the ground game so that we can lean on our defense. Like all this, does that play into the overall outlook for Justin Herbert? At this point, I don't have that clarity. So right. I wanted to kind of remain a little bit, I've used cautiously optimistic, right? So I think, but again, I mentioned it, the difference between 5 and 8 in my rankings here at this point, if I've got you in my top 10, it means I'm pretty optimistic on you. I think that you're pretty solid and have a very good chance of being a top tier contributor for many years down the road.
Well, and I think you make valid points, and Steichen is leaving. So, the coaching change is always scary, right? But you would like to think that these are supposed to be the best and brightest minds in football in the entire world, and they will see that they have the offensive rookie of the year on their team and allow him to do what he does well, which is throw the ball downfield. And, as we look at these, like you said, if you're inside the top 10, you're a stud. What I'm really excited about is you have my man, Dak Prescott, ranked really, really high. And I want you to really dive into Dak and why you have him ranked where you do.
Yeah, for sure. So doubling back to Justin Herbert really quick, you did mention Shane Steichen did leave. He is now the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia alongside Nick Sirianni there. And then Joe Lombardi is now the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles. So we could see a shift in offensive philosophy. Going back to Dak, I don't think that the injury should play any factor here. As soon as I said the injury, I had the mental image, right, of him just holding his ankle and So I don't think that should play any sort of role in my ranking of him. When he is healthy, when he is on the field with the pass catching core that he has around him, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Blake Jarwin, Dalton Schultz, we talked about that on a previous episode, like Ezekiel Elliott out of the backfield, Tony Pollard, like the supporting cast around him is enough for him to just play out of his mind, right? Just play extremely solid football. So I think moving forward, I'm very optimistic on Dak. Still very young. You talked about Burrow at 25. He's going to be 25. Dak's only 27. So the difference in age here is not crazy. I think that Dak, long term, I'm still all in with him.
Love him. living down here in Dallas, he's the heart and soul of Dallas. I do think they get something done, and that's the only reason I have him outside of my top 5 is just the uncertainty. If Dak goes to the Denver Broncos, maybe that's good, but I just think that where he's at, what he's able to do on the ground, through the air, the pass-catching weapons that Dallas has, I'm with you. I'm not concerned about the ankle injury. All kinds of medical people that I've read or seen things, they're like, broke his leg, he'll be fine for training camp, he'll be ready for the season. So that does not play a factor into my ranking of Dak Prescott. But he's a phenomenal quarterback, and he's got a rushing floor for you. He's got a rushing touchdown floor. And then do you remember the tear that Dak was on to start?
Fire.
It was 400-yard game after 400-yard game. He was getting you 50, 45 points a game. It was insane what he was doing. So if you just, I know we can't duplicate production one for one, but if he's anywhere near that player or better, I think 5 and 6 may be too low for Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and I think there are going to be people in startup drafts that are going to be kind of scared off of the injury. And at that point, if you can get Dak at even more of a discount, then yeah, absolutely sign me up. Let's take a look here at Deshaun Watson. Now, obviously, this is a whole situation, and who knows what the heck's going to happen here. If Deshaun Watson, if we get to the point where let's just play it forward. If Deshaun Watson holds out this season, which is a very realistic possibility, if he holds out, does he move down your rankings at all?
Yeah, he would move down a little bit. He'd take a little bit of a tumble, but, extremely young. From the time that he took over as a rookie, I mean, he's efficient, he's dynamic. And, if I asked you to name 5 Texans wide receivers, it'd probably be a struggle to get there. And he still led the league in passing yards, which just blows my mind how good Deshaun Watson was. And, we talk about, him potentially holding out. Yates, I ask you, if he goes to Carolina or potentially the Bears, I mean, what does that do for his stock in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, those are 2 very different scenarios. So I think if he goes to Carolina, then that's something where the supporting cast around him, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel might not be back, Robbie Anderson, I mean, if they add a tight end, at that point, I think it's a very different situation. Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator. I would love that. I think that he would maybe even bump up over Kyler Murray in my rankings. As far as going to Chicago, that's a different scenario because who is going to be catching the ball from him, right? Like the pass catchers there are a bit of a question mark with Allen Robinson potentially barreling towards free agency. So, yeah, I think that he would fall a little bit if he does end up in Chicago, which does not seem like a realistic possibility.
Yeah.
I don't think that they would even have any sort of the package that they would have to send away to get him. But then if he does end up in Carolina, I think that bodes well for his fantasy stock. Now, I asked you the question about him holding out because for me, I don't know if it would. I don't know if he would bump down my rankings. It depends on the overall situation and reading the tea leaves and, just, okay, what does that mean long term when we get to that point? But based on my understanding of the situation, he would still have to report by week 10 to be able to count that season. Right. So, it would just be kind of like we would view him, okay, he's out for the first 10 weeks of the season. He landed on IR or whatever, right? At that point, it's Dynasty, man. I'm not going to move a franchise quarterback, a guy who has played at the level that Deshaun Watson has, because he landed on IR, right? Yeah. That's the way that I think I would approach it. But I think if this situation does fester to the point where he just says, okay, well, I'm not even going to report this season, and it's about the principal, and I don't care how much money you find, then that, of course, would alter. But knowing what I know, that at least he has to report by week 10 to count that season, then that would be something. But yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, man, I mean, I've got him at 2, so I'm extremely high on him. I just, these 2 through 5 for me, it's just so tight. It's so tight. And, at 2, if he were to hold out, I would have no problem bumping my number 3 guy up over him, but he's still going to be a top 5 quarterback for me overall.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Let's take a look at Kyler Murray here. Kyler, obviously, I think the majority of his fantasy stock doesn't come through mainly his passing volume, right? He is in a very pass-happy offense. He's got DeAndre Hopkins, which, of course, is great. It's his rushing ability. It's his ability to scramble and pick up 30 yards on the ground because he's just a jitterbug out on the field, moving at a different speed than everyone else. So especially around the goal line, he was utilized heavily in that fashion even last year. But then we saw him get banged up, right? It was that shoulder injury, but yet we didn't know what exactly was going on, and that affected him around the goal line. They weren't utilizing him as that goal line running back, if you will. But then towards the end of the season, we started to see that change, and Kenyon Drake's stock took a dip, right? Mm-hmm. So moving forward into next year, I don't want to bump Kyler so far down and that we forget about what he has done as a runner and how valuable that is for fantasy, especially when he does have – Kyler's a great passer, right? Yeah. It's a different scenario from a Lamar Jackson where you have questions about his overall passing technique and, his refinement in that area. No, Kyler's got a cannon of an arm. He's accurate downfield. There's some issues here or there, of course, but yet it's enough for me to keep him securely here in my top 3, right? Like, I'm very optimistic for him long term, still very young. This is his 3rd season now, heading into his 3rd season. So Kyler long term, I'm a big fan of. I think that you can still build your dynasty team, your superflex team around him. But I know that you had him in your top 5 too. Where did he land exactly?
Yeah, I have him at 4. I have him overall at 4.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's great. He's fantastic. 26 touchdowns through the air, 11 on the ground. He was, over 800 rushing yards. I mean, that's on 133 attempts. So, like you said, he's ripping off like 30-yard runs, 20-yard runs, juking people out. The only reason I have him at 4, and it sounds crazy, is just it's the size, right? Normally we see Kyler Murray get down and not get hit. He is very good at avoiding the big hit. But this season we did see him tagged a couple of times, and when he gets hit, he's 5'10", 200 pounds. And the guys that I have ranked
if that,
and the guys that I have ranked above him, 6'5", 6'3", 220, 218, they're sturdier players. So long-term sustainability is the only reason I have him at 4, but 4 is great. I mean, I would be happy to draft Kyler Murray as my QB1 any day of the week, and he's 23 years old. 23 years old.
Yeah, splitting hairs with the top guys here. So, Josh Allen, let's talk about him. I mean, not coming out of nowhere, but as far as the season that he had this last year, greatly exceeded expectations, set the league on fire, was performing at an MVP level. What he brings you as far as a passer now with Stephon Diggs in town, and then also with his rushing floor, the rushing touchdown upside, I mean, just crazy what he's able to do. So I've got him at 2. Long term, I think that's another one of those guys that you can absolutely build your dynasty team around. You were getting him as your QB2 in some spots in Superflex startups last year. There were people who wouldn't touch Josh Allen with a 10-foot pole, and now they're looking pretty foolish because of what he has turned into. So Josh Allen, long term, I'm a big fan of. Are there really any negatives with Josh Allen? Like, is there anything that we can point to and say, like, this is his path that he doesn't sustain this value long term?
No. I see no negatives.
I couldn't come up with one.
No, I'm being serious. There are no negatives. I mean, he's everything you said, and then he's 6'5", 240 pounds, and it's amazing how a quarterback gets better when you give him an elite wide receiver to throw the ball to. I just
shocking.
Yeah, isn't that something? Just what an amazing concept. Get him a wide receiver, and look how much better he got. Now, will he throw for 70% completion percentage again? Maybe not, but there are no negatives, none. He's amazing. He's fantastic, and I have him at quarterback 3, and easily. That's why I said, if Deshaun Watson said, I'm not going to play this season okay, Deshaun, you'll go down to QB3 and I'll move Josh Allen to QB2. No issues, no slight to Watson. I'm just looking for a reason to bump Josh Allen up.
Yeah, we talked about no negatives with Josh Allen. Number 1 quarterback, no negatives, man. I really don't know if we need to sit here and dissect Patrick Mahomes from a dynasty perspective and what he brings to the table, man. I mean, he's got the long-term contract. You know that he's going to be great for years and years and years. Play this forward 5 years from now. Is Patrick Mahomes probably still your number 1 dynasty quarterback? Like, what's the percentage chance of that happening?
I think it's a very, very high probability that he's still the number 1 quarterback, and if somebody overtakes him at the 1 spot, it has to be multiple just ridiculous type seasons, right? The only, it's not even a negative. I just wonder, Yates, after the Chiefs tried to throw their way to a Super Bowl, and it didn't happen, right? Defense, I know the offensive line was banged up. I just wonder if they do a little more to protect Mahomes, maybe not throw it as much. Maybe they shave it, run it a little bit more, incorporate the run a little bit more, and even if they do that, he's still going to throw for 4,500 yards a season. I wonder if they're going to just try to protect him a little bit more. If there's one negative that I would like Mahomes not to do, it's to take so many big hits. He gets rocked, man. He runs around a lot, and he gets rocked. He gets tackled awkwardly. I would just really like him to just get down and not get hit.
Yeah, well, that's the conversation of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's like, okay, well, he's great. He's in a fantastic offense, Are they going to give him the ball?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that is really in Andy Reid's DNA as a play caller, right? To be able to turn away from Patrick Mahomes and what he brings to the table as a passer, to turn away from that. But I agree with you that would be the only thing that I think would bump him down. But even at that point, he's going to come down from, from the heavens to just still be at the number one spot, right? Like the gap there won't be enough to push him down past the number one. Looking at the 2021 QB class, right? We know at this point the guys who are in it. We know of Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones. You got Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond later on. Davis Mills out of Stanford. You got these guys in here, right? So looking at our top 15, we didn't do the rookies within here. We still need to know the landing spot to be able to kind of definitively say, okay, yes, they could push, or this is where they're going to land. But let's just play this forward. Let's play a little exercise here. Like Trevor Lawrence, let's look at him first. If he does end up in Jacksonville, which, again, we talked about probability, that's 150% at this point.
Yeah.
He ends up there. Where does he land? With just gut feeling, where does he land in your QB rankings?
He's top 10. I think he's top 10, or he's right there between Rodgers and Hurts for me at QB 11.
Yeah, I don't want to go super crazy and say, like, I'm going to rank him above the Joe Burrows and the Dak Prescotts, right? Like where he's a top 5 guy right out of the gate. I'm not going to go that far, but yeah, absolutely. Top 10, probably would put him just above Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Honestly, that's my gut reaction. Probably just be in that range. Let's look at Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields, from what he brings as a passer, but then also as a mobile quarterback. We talked about this with Josh Allen and the other guys towards the top of a Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray. What they bring as far as their rushing ability, Justin Fields is going to bring that same level. So Fields, is he far off from Trevor Lawrence? Again, gut feeling, we don't know his landing spot. This one's a little bit harder to predict. So gut feeling, where would he land for you?
Gut feeling, just based off of what we talked about today, I'd take him over Jalen Hurts. So that would slot him right there at QB 11. He's inside my top 12.
Yep, I think I would put him right above Jalen Hurts too, so probably at QB 12. Gut feeling there. Let's go with Zach Wilson. For me, Zach Wilson's going to be outside my top 15.
Yep.
I've got him a little bit lower than these other guys. We talked about that. I know you're on the same page there. So, but again, would still be in that same range. I've got Tua at 16, and then I've got Kirk Cousins, Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Tom Brady. Like, the list gets pretty gross right after that. So Zach Wilson would probably be in that Kirk Cousins territory right away, with the potential that he does move up. But he's one of those guys that I got to see how he translates to the NFL before I move him up.
Yeah, same here. And I'd actually have Trey Lance ahead of Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I do too. I've got Trey Lance actually as my QB2 in this class. So Lance, he would land in that same territory. I would probably put him I've got him pretty neck and neck with Trevor Lawrence as far as my grading and just outlook, long-term outlook. So, yeah, it would probably be in that 11-10 range for me, just behind Trevor Lawrence.
Love it. And we're not leaving this until I make you talk about Mac Jones, who for me would be in that Kirk Cousins territory. He'd be around Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, off the top of my head, he'd be a top 20 quarterback for me off the bat.
Yeah, man, this is like landing spot for Mac Jones matters so much, right? Like, I'm not trying to cop out. I'm really not. But yet, for him, it's going to matter so much where he lands and what offense he's a part of and who the playmakers are around him. Like, it's kind of the same thing with Tua. Like, we're talking about Tua at 16 for me. Well, if he had the playmakers around him, he might be top 10. With Mac Jones, I just don't know. What's the NFL's view of him? Is he going to be in the first round? Mike Tannenbaum's coming out and talking about him. The floor is number 8 overall. Like, I don't see that happening. But at that point, if he does go in the top 8, in the top 10, then okay, I've got to acknowledge it. I've got to acknowledge that the NFL was high on him, the situation's great around him, this. Then at that point, absolutely, he lands in my top 15 probably. If he falls outside the first round, which is a very good possibility, then at that point, he's probably not going to crack my top 20 because he might not even be the starter on his team. So really don't want to cop out there, but this is one of the players where I gotta know the landing spot before I definitively say this is where I land on Mac Jones.
That's fair. I think landing spot does matter for Mac Jones and the situation that he falls into. I do believe he's going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. And, when that happens, if and when that happens, then I think, a lot of people, and it's not just you, a lot of people will have to revisit that because he's going to get an opportunity to start if he's drafted that high. And, starting quarterbacks,
oh, absolutely.
You need those guys. But I think that's fair right now.
Yeah, and it's with the other guys, the top 4 that we talked about, I don't have that concern. I know definitively that they're going in the top 10, right? And they're going to be starters sooner rather than later. Unless one of them lands at Atlanta at number 4, right, and sits behind Matt Ryan, then of course we'll adjust then. But again, this was just an exercise to say the gut feeling, what's the overall view of these guys in the class. And we'll do that again next year, right? At this time next year, we'll talk about the Dynasty QB rankings and talk about the 2022 class to be able to give you kind of a glimpse at the overall strength of the class and how they would slide in with the current quarterbacks rankings in Dynasty. All right, that's going to be it for today. Again, a huge thank you to Reality Sports Online for sponsoring the show. Head over to realitysportsonline.com to learn more about their amazing platform. Ray, you know this. I talked about it earlier. I will be out on vacation, brother, for the remainder of this week. So this will be the only episode. Once I get back, we will jump back into our normal routine of our 2 shows per week, and we will just continue to deliver the top-notch Dynasty content that you guys have been coming to know. So thank you so much for everyone who has rated and reviewed the podcast. Again, those ratings and reviews continue to just skyrocket up. We're so appreciative. Ray, anything else that you want to add before we get out of here?
Yates, you enjoy your vacation, brother. You deserve it.
Thank you, man. I am so excited. Except for the waking up at 4 a.m. tomorrow and driving. That's not going to be fun. But anyway, for Ray Gardner, I'm Kyle Yates, and we'll see you next time. Looking for useful content, fantasy-relevant information, and the data that can help your team win? Then make sure to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so we can help you dominate your league all season long.